bad budget bill. It is a horrific budget bill, an extremely cruel bill, and the most unfair budget ever presented in the modern history of our country. At a time of massive income and wealth inequality, this budget provides $1.9 trillion in tax breaks for the top 1%. At a time when millions of working families are struggling to keep their heads above water, this budget cuts Medicaid by $1 trillion. 15 million Americans could lose their health insurance. This is a budget that poll after poll shows the American people do not want.
Hello, everyone. I'm Graham Ledger, and welcome to the Daily Ledger. Our cover story, bravado over a budget that has something for everyone to dislike. The Marxist socialist from Vermont, notwithstanding, the Republican-controlled U.S. Senate actually acted like it's in the majority by passing another bloated budget. And that's the problem. Red ink. There is a lot of it. This plan squeaked by on a 51-49 vote, with Senator Rand Paul voting no. And the reason Senator Paul gave thumbs down is the deficit spending. However, on the other side of the legislative coin, this bill does pave the way for much-needed tax relief.
The yeas are 51. The nays are 49.
Senate Republicans clear a crucial hurdle on Thursday with a vote allowing them to cut taxes without Democratic support. Now comes the hard part.
Senate Republicans are breathing easy after taking the first step in what's likely to be a months-long effort to overhaul the nation's 70,000-page tax code. The bill allowing them to pass tax-related legislation with just 50 votes rather than the 60 they usually need to get legislation through the Senate. But that's no guarantee of success. As we've seen with their failure to roll back Obamacare, Senate Republicans this year have had a hard time just agreeing amongst themselves. And the debate over taxes is shaping up to be every bit as contentious as the debate over health care.
The bill passing Thursday night after Senate Republican leader Mitch McConnell was able to scrape together a majority.
We have a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity.
President Trump tweeting out his approval Friday morning, promising the Senate vote will lead to the biggest tax cuts in U.S. history. Now the real debate begins. President Trump and Republican leaders are hoping to simplify the tax code by lowering rates, but they're already at odds over whether wealthy families should get a tax cut and whether popular tax breaks should be preserved. And there are budget hawks like Senator Bob Corker of Tennessee who say they'll refuse to vote for any tax plan that would increase the national debt. The White House and Republican leaders saying that tax cuts will pay for themselves through faster economic growth, but independent tax experts say that's not likely. The debate is certain to heat up as interest groups of all stripes mobilize to protect their perks.
So in this budget, we have a good news, bad news situation. The bad, spending more money, hundreds of billions of dollars that we do not have. The good, the potential for the greatest tax overhaul since the 1980s.
By passing a comprehensive, fiscally responsible budget that will help put the federal government on a path to balance. The budget also gives us the tools we need to strengthen our economy after years of stagnation under the previous administration. We have a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to replace a failing tax code that holds Americans back with one that actually works for them. To middle-class families across America, we have a very simple message. We want to take more money out of Washington's pockets and put more in yours. Now with this budget, we're on a path to delivering much-needed relief to American individuals and families who have borne the burdens of an unfair tax code for entirely too long.
That is McConnell's happy face, in case it's hard to tell. Old Turkey Neck came through for the president following their talk earlier this week. And so what's next? Well, the president will sign the budget, and then it will go back to Congress for reconciliation. It is through budget reconciliation where the tax overhaul will emerge. But what a process. Who's worse? The Democrats who want to deny Americans tax relief, or the Republicans who are denying us a balanced budget once again? Joining me now from Nashville, Tennessee, hedge fund manager, behavioral economist, and columnist for Forbes, Tom Landstreet. Tom, I have a problem, and the problem is the truth. Yes, I get it, that this budget that they pass lays the foundation for reconciliation process to take place, and we can get these tax cuts in, which the American people surely deserve. But the problem I have is that it doesn't seem like many people on Capitol Hill are telling the truth, at least on the Republican side, that this thing is not even close to being a balanced budget. And here we are once again. The Republicans have had control of Congress for how many years now and have yet to produce a balanced budget?
Well, it's hard to argue that, Graham, honestly. But we have to play politics here. Remember, in politics, you never get exactly what you want. So you really have to play 3 or 4 level chess. And in this situation, if you ask me, I would prefer tax cuts over a balanced budget in the short term. What do we need to do to prevail in Congress and the Senate next year in the next election cycle? We badly need a thriving economy. If the Republicans are going to survive Trump, and if Trump is going to survive, which who knows if he will, we do need a thriving economy because that's how Trump got elected. I ask people all the time, how in the heck do you think a man as, how do I say, prickly as Trump, maybe even as unattractive as Trump, gets elected in a TV-oriented society like ours? And I'll tell you, it's because we're not doing well. We're not thriving economically. So if you pass this tax cut and you get a pickup in GDP, then maybe you get a second chance. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and the check's in the mail. See, this is the problem I have. Facts are stubborn things. I want to drill down a little bit here. Facts are stubborn things. And so revenues in the fiscal year 2017 were $3.3 trillion to the United States Treasury, right? Estimated revenues in fiscal year 2018, $3.6 trillion. The proposed budget is at least $4 trillion. Now, I went to a state university, so it takes me a little while to do the math. But I see at the very minimum a $400 billion shortfall in terms of spending. On the bright side, on the dark side, it could be more like $700 billion in the hole. And I understand what you're saying. I do believe in the tax cuts, and I understand why the Republicans are doing it through the budget, through reconciliation, because they don't believe they can do it any other way. Okay, I get that, but the bottom line is, here we go with deficit spending again, and my bottom line here is that Washington, once again, doesn't have a revenue problem. It has a spending problem.
I agree with you 100%. And they're two different topics. You know, Obama doubled the budget deficit, as you know. It was something like $10.5 billion when he came in, trillion, then he goes to 19. Did you ever hear a Democrat talk about budget deficits then? The only time a Democrat ever cares about our budget deficit is when there's a tax cut on the table. We really need these tax cuts, and we really need them now in order for the average American to do better and, of course, to benefit the Republicans in the next election. So I'm going to skew on the side of tax cuts, and I do think they pay for themselves, if not completely, certainly partially.
70% of the spending is mandatory spending, and that would be Social Security and Medicare plus Obamacare. Now, you know, these are 2015 numbers. $2.8 trillion in spending is mandatory. Spending is probably more like $3 trillion now. Senator Bob Corker, the senator who represents the great state of Tennessee, calls this whole budget package a hoax. He voted for it because he does want to get the tax cuts. So, you know, in Washington, D.C., I think Senator Corker is personifying essentially what you're talking about, but I believe that his characterization of this is correct, that this is all a hoax.
He's right. He's absolutely right. But again, he voted for it.
Yep.
We have to play priorities. We just have to. We need this tax cut right now. I really believe it. Now, let's go to some of the things that are kind of happening, let's say, behind the scenes.
All right.
Did you realize that the SNAP program, which is this Supplemental Nutritional Assistance Program, basically food stamps, the federal government has cut something like 40,000 people from those roles without having to go to Congress to do so. You've got the EPA that's been pulled back substantially. So while Donald Trump is creating a skirmish and a dust cloud over here to the right, there are a number of agencies that are doing some amazing things, including cutting spending, off-balance sheet spending, and they're also enacting some policy reform restrictions and requirements that are being reduced that are going to lead to accelerated GDP. So I just don't think it's a black or white static situation.
It's not a binary choice. I'm not trying to make it one. I'm just trying to hone in on the whole budget process. I get it. And by the way, you know, this mandatory spending of Social Security and Medicare, I do believe every time I open up my paycheck, I have money going into Social Security and Medicare, and that just proves that these are insolvent entities, and it's just a matter of time before these things implode. And exactly where is the plan from Congress on that? We know it's non-existent. Okay, so let's go to the taxes real quick. We're looking at 3 brackets. This is what we're being told, 12, 25, and 35. Where do you think they're going to break off that 35%? To me, that's still a relatively high number. I don't know why there's 23 points between one set of Americans and another set of Americans simply because one set of Americans is doing well. That one still baffles me, but let's go with it, 35%. Where do you think the Mendoza line on that is going to be in terms of income? You have any inkling?
30? I'm not sure. Oh, well, in terms of income,
Yeah.
I couldn't tell you. You know, what you're saying is a flat tax is preferable,
Yeah.
and you're right. And not just because it would benefit the economy, but it's easier to budget. The problem with pinning all your revenues, federal government revenues, on the richest people is when you go through a significant downturn like in 2000 after the internet bubble, you lose all those revenues and suddenly you're in deficit spending like you wouldn't, like they never planned. So a flat tax is preferable. I can't tell you where this is going to come down. I do like the corporate tax cut, and I do like the cut of the highest marginal rate. My guess it'll end up around 30.
Okay, I want to get to corporate in just a second, but first, it's back to the income taxes. The bad I see in this is eliminating the property tax deduction. I think that's an issue, especially in states like California and New York, where they're paying property taxes through the nose. And of course, the elimination of state and local taxes, same thing for both states and other states, I should say. And so this goes to the inherent problem of a system that we have now. And you brought up the flat tax. If you eliminate all deductions and go to a flat tax, then we don't have to deal with any of this and bargaining which deductions are going to stay and which are not.
Well, you're absolutely correct. But let's go back to why would I'm a homeowner. I do appreciate the deduction. But why are they emphasizing home ownership over any other asset that I might spend money on? Why should I? That to me is strange, although I do appreciate it. And in regard to deduction of state and local taxes, my friends in Connecticut and New York who suffer mightily every day from those tax rates, they do get a break from being able to deduct those from their federal tax forms. But let me ask you something. If that went away, how much pressure would be exerted on Albany and on Hartford from the residents that lose that deduction? That pressure might lead to lower tax rates ultimately, right?
That's what the framers of the Constitution would be applauding if folks in California said, hey, we're not going to be able to write this off anymore. Yeah, we're going to move to Texas, for example. Yes, but I don't know. You know, on paper it sounds good. I just don't know how that would work so easily. The other problem I have is a zero tax bracket. I firmly believe, Tom, that whether you are rich or you are dirt poor, that every American should have some skin in the game. You agree?
I absolutely agree. And I don't think there's any question about that. And then there's the budgeting situation. You know that I'll give you an example. In California, you remember Gray Davis, who was recalled from the governorship? So in the 1996, 7, 8, 9 era, when the internet was going berserk, 25% of the state of California's general budget revenues came from 2 different taxes. There were exercise stock options and realized capital gains. And that came from the very richest of their residents. So when the internet bubble burst and those 25% of those revenues dried up, they went from a budget surplus to a significant budget deficit. And it really was a catalyst for Greg Davis being recalled. The real reason that you need everybody paying taxes, especially those on the lower end of the earnings spectrum, is because stability. You need those revenues through bust and through boom cycles. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And corporate taxes, real quick here, going from almost 40% in some cases down to about 25%. We'd like them even lower, but we'll go with 25%. And I've argued on this program many, many times that there is no such thing as a corporate tax because businesses pass on that tax to the consumer, whether they have a product or whether they have a service. So my question would be, if the corporate tax rate goes down, do you think that consumers will see that in the price of a hamburger?
You mean, will hamburger prices go up because demand goes up?
No, prices go down because they have to pay less taxes. McDonald's is paying fewer taxes, right?
Absolutely. Growth is deflationary, is what you're saying. Growth is really deflationary. What happens when you tax something, Greg, you know this, you get less of it, right?
Right.
So when you reduce tax rates on production, on income, on labor, on anything, you get more of it. I'm a small business. I'm taxed heavily because it's a healthy business. I know with perfect certainty that if I was paying 20% corporate tax rates, there's a young man, a Sewanee University graduate that I would hire today that I cannot hire. I'm very close. I can't. Now, what would happen when he becomes a productive citizen?
Mm-hmm.
So I agree with you 100%.
There's that trickle down that Democrats always make fun of. It's there and it's real, and it affects everybody in the economy if we're allowed to have more money in our pockets. And the bottom line is, once again, these Democrats have come out and say that you have to pay for a tax cut. That is a complete and total hijacking of the nomenclature of taxes, because that presumes that the money is the government's in the first place and not ours. And that kind of thinking needs to stop. Tom, thank you. Coming up next.